following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
My name is Jasmine, and I am a recovering drug addict.
My name is Richie Farrell, a.k.a. the Old White Junkie.
And we are your hosts for Exit Team Nashua.
Our mission is to bring recovery into the living room.
Last year, over 72,000 Americans died of an accidental overdose.
That's almost 200 Americans every single day.
We will bring you guests with real-life experiences with addiction and recovery. Welcome to Exit Team Nashua.
Hi, welcome to the Exit Team Nashua. I'm Amy. I'm filling in for Jasmine tonight. And for those of you that don't know me, my name is Amy, and I'm a woman in long-term recovery from heroin, alcohol, you name it. Richie likes to call me the mermaid. And I'm here. We're going to switch up the show tonight because that's what I like to do, and I don't really like to follow the rules. So tonight's show, we're going to talk about yoga and eating disorder recovery, and, you know, maybe a little bit about having, you know, parents who drink, or who knows. So we're here to open with all those questions, and tonight I have one of my favorite people here with me. I've asked my friend Sammy to be on. I'll let her introduce a little bit, tell her a little about what she does, what programs, and all the things.
All the things. I'm Sammy Migliozzi. I own a yoga studio in Massachusetts, and I've taught yoga for 10-ish years, which is crazy. I also direct a nonprofit where, you know, our goal is to work with teenagers who are around anything concerning body image. So eating disorder recovery, preventing and recovery from addiction or addictive behavior. Like I said, just body image, body awareness, and reproductive health and personal boundaries. So I'm excited to be here.
Yay. Yeah, the nonprofit is new. I'm actually on the board for the nonprofit. I'm super excited about it because I feel that, you know, addiction and those kinds of things, and really all comes down to us learning as a child that we don't love ourselves and we compare ourselves. And, you know, some people go one way and they go towards addiction, or, you know.
Exactly.
We'll talk a little bit about, you know, your personal experience of, you know, what got you passionate about helping people, or yoga with eating disorders.
Yeah, exactly what you said. Like, it's all stems from the same, just being uncomfortable in your own body, and that manifests in a variety of different addictive behaviors, but it's all like a lack of self-love and, you know, a lack of worthiness that comes from.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not even from a parent, or, you know, from like it could just simply be society's idea of what we should look like, what we should be wearing, or, you know, and then we, you know, become so secluded or seclude ourselves, or not feel good enough, or not feel worthy. So we turn to these other destructive behaviors.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not like an ego-driven thing. What you're saying is so true, that we are like a barometer almost for society when we see that things are messed up, especially as young kids. Like, in the world, we have this reaction almost as a control reaction, because we can't do anything else about it, you know, to control our situation. And that's obviously why it, you know, shows up more with parents who are either addicts, or, you know, narcissists, or just aren't available. And you often see these behaviors showing up in those kids more because they're so out of control of their situation that they turn to addictive behavior to regain control.
Yeah. Do you want to share a little bit about your, you know, personal struggle or what that looked like and how you got out of it? And
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't have an awesome, easy time growing up, but nobody does. And my parents had their own faults and issues that we were struggling with. That they got divorced when I was young, and just my whole situation felt very much out of my control, like I was describing, and I felt very out of control of my body as well because I was struggling with some health issues, and anxiety, depression, and physical health issues as well. And all of this kind of manifested as an eating disorder, pretty severe anorexia, because food and my intake and exercise was the only thing that I could control. So it's so crazy. My mom recently moved, and I found one of my old journals, and like how I would log every single, item I put into my mouth, and like every single step that I took to try to like manipulate my, calories essentially to reach my goals, which were just arbitrary, ridiculous. They meant nothing. And looking back, that feels so far away now. But at the time, to have such stringent parameters was like my way of keeping things in order. And it's just so crazy to think how desperate we can be to like have that happen. And luckily, I had someone intervene when I was around 15 or 16 who really just completely changed my mindset. And she help me feel at home in my body and see how I could regain my power in other ways, which is why now with the nonprofit, I'm so passionate about intervening in like those crucial moments in young women's lives to give them their power back so they don't have to have these crazy parameters for themselves.
yeah, and and to relate it, to addiction, and that was the same. Like I, just wanted to escape myself. Like I didn't want to be a part of my body. I didn't love my body. I didn't love who I was. So when I drank and drugged and did those things, like I was no longer in my body because I just didn't want to be. I didn't want to be myself, and I didn't even know why I didn't want to be myself.
Yeah. The reason gets so far away from you, and like once you're in it, I mean, eating disorders have even a closer tie to like alcohol and drug addiction than I think people realize. Like the high that comes with starvation high, or like just how you can manipulate your brain with food is like so intense, and it's a physical addiction to that feeling in a really similar way. And once you're in it, you lose sight of how you got there in the first place. Like you're saying, like, why do I not like my body? Why don't I even want to be in there? And it's just about survival at that point, I remember thinking like, there will never be a day that I don't think about food 24/7. And that became almost suicidal at that point, because the idea of an existence that was like just about the next meal was like exhausting.
And I get it, because that's like how I was as an addict, like just constantly thinking about when, even if I had the drug in front of me or the drink in front of me, it wasn't even about that. It was like, oh, I have to do this. How am I going to survive?
Right.
And it's that existence of like, why am I even living in this existence?
Right.
And I know for me, and I've worked with, hundreds of women through, my recovery work. And a lot of women, that's where their addiction starts. And a lot of them have eating disorders on top of addiction. And, once you do a lot of drugs and drink and do those things, like you don't want to eat. So you get the shape that you think that you want to be. And, through, doing the pills, the Adderall, the cocaine, those kinds of outside substances, they realize in their eating disorder that will help them support them.
It's so closely tied. And it's crazy that eating disorders, the difference I feel like is the societal like stigma around drug and alcohol addiction is so apparent, and around eating disorders it's so like socially acceptable, in a lot of ways. I know you and I talk about this all the time, like that it's totally normal if a woman makes a comment about her weight or about her body, or a self-deprecating comment or even joke, or talks about dieting and calorie restriction. Like all of that is just what is expected of us, like
Right.
as women. And we're not calling it out as like addictive and dangerous behavior. And that's, such a huge difference, is that we need to start calling it out for what it is. And there should be just as much, support and recovery around it as there is hopefully starting to be for drug and alcohol addiction, because it's crazy to think of, like, obviously there are major differences, but the fact that one of them is just flying so undetected and right in front of our faces, and
that it's just so normal for moms to like say to their kids that, oh, you're getting a little chub. You know what I mean? Just really unhealthy conversations around food, and not even being aware that that could potentially be causing harm.
right.
Because it's like, oh, my mom's saying that I'm getting fat, or, oh, my friends are saying it. So, what do I do? Because then what am I supposed to talk about? Like, and then I'll just restrict my food, or, whatever. It's just the language that has become so, the fasting isn't good for women.
Right.
And we have all these stars that are saying that they're, not eating for 18 hours. And, the proven fact, and we talked about this a few weeks ago, that any scientific fact is actually proven on men and not on women.
Yeah. Honestly, it is, now that I'm thinking about it, almost as like out in the, like, hidden right in front of our faces as like mainstream or socially acceptable alcohol addiction, which I know you call out all the time, where
the wine culture.
Yeah, wine culture, like where like it's totally fine for moms to make, and we're calling out moms pretty hard, but just, people in general to make comments about really needing a drink because parenting is hard, or, relying on wine to get through the day. And these are also comments that we like shouldn't be normalizing. And it's just it's setting us up to really be not addressing what's actually happening, whether we're channeling our anxiety, fear, and lack of self-worth into alcohol or into a eating disorder, dietary restricting. Like, it doesn't matter the path. Like we said, it's all coming from the same inability to look and address it, like what the internal stuff is.
And I think that's the biggest thing that we're missing in all of this, is that people are disconnected. They're disconnected with self, and they have all these different avenues to, to mask that with eating disorders, wine, alcoholism, pills, Xanax. The doctor prescribed me Klonopin because I was getting anxious. And we're not actually identifying and healing what's going on inside of ourselves.
Yeah.
And I know obviously, my story started with 12-step and recovery from my alcoholism, but the alcoholism wasn't the problem. The drugs weren't the problem. The food wasn't the problem. The problem was, how do I learn how to have that relationship with myself? And for me, when I was about, 5 years sober, I was really struggling with like taking on too much and, helping more people than I was helping myself. And I got really into yoga.
Yeah.
And I know that we have similar, experiences with that. And I'll have you share yours, and then, we can talk about that a little bit more. And questions about yoga or how that's helped, we're open to any questions from the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's where the 12-step programs and yoga have so much crossover, as you know, is in addressing, looking in the mirror and being willing and like eager to get to the bottom of things and be like really get to know yourself on that level, probably for the first time for most like adults. So, yoga was completely a mirror for me. I couldn't, go to a class and do physical things with my body and also sit in meditation and be in denial about my eating disorder or like how poorly I was treating my body. It was just like so blatantly in front of me on my mat that it forced me to like look at it and first of all admit how badly I was treating myself, and then decide, first of all, forgive myself, and then decide like what I wanted to do about it. And as I worked through my eating disorder, I got to see that reflected on my mat as well, like how far I had come, how my body felt stronger and healthier and more empowered, and also my mind was calmer, and I was getting, to know myself and become comfortable in my own mind and my own body, and it also gave me a spiritual practice.
Mind, body, spirit.
Mind, body, spirit, all the things.
All the things. That's like the premise of 12 steps, is that what we have to do. And that's what I wasn't, for me, like when I hit that point at 5 years sober, I wasn't taking care of my mind, my body, or my spirit.
Yeah.
I was giving and giving and giving. And like you said, when I stepped on the mat, I couldn't be anywhere else. You're in the movement, you're in the breathing, and I'm here and I'm taking care of myself in just the practice of breathing and moving.
Yeah. It's simple, but like what you talked about earlier with distraction, there is no distraction, right? Like being with the breath and being with the movement forces us into the present moment and with how we're actually how we're actually doing, like how are we showing up? And that is huge. I return to my mat anytime that I'm feeling like I'm losing my path or losing that connection to something bigger than myself. And it's like a constant because it's so simple, it's always there,
Yeah. So me and Sammy are both Y12SR certified, and that's yoga and the 12 steps. And it's a certain program that it's Nikki Myers, she created it, and it just aligns how those two things work. And there's all kinds of things that say that it's trauma, that a lot of people turn to eating disorders and addictions and all of those things for trauma. And what we learned through the Y12SR program is that we're constantly affected by trauma, and we do some workshops sometimes together around this. And one of the favorite things that you said in the last one that we did was, we're on our phones and we're like in these Facebook arguments, or we're in an argument with our boyfriend, or we're in an argument with something, and that trauma is happening to us, and people are just staying still and they're not moving. Mm-hmm. And it's just so true that like these things, our issues lie in our tissues.
Yes. Never a truer
statement. And we're just stuck.
Yeah. Yeah. We're learning so much every day about how trauma is stored in the body. And I feel, so strongly that it will become more evident like how important movement is in releasing trauma. But everything that we know right now is like intuitive, right? Like after you have a traumatic situation or a traumatic event happen, you literally want to like shake it off. Like your body wants to release it. And oftentimes we don't, because we're such a sedentary, society. And so learning how to allow your body that movement is just, it's so like it's something anybody can do. Like you don't need to go to a yoga class, you don't need to do that. You can do a video online, or you can do it at home by yourself. Yoga doesn't have to look a certain way. Yoga is just choosing to like show up with your body and move in a way that feels good. Pay attention to your breath, like just sitting with yourself, right? Yoga means union of mind, body, spirit. Like we're talking about, there's no one way that needs to look. So however you find it accessible for you, it's going to have a beneficial effect.
Yeah, and we got a question from the audience. Is yoga expensive? And, and we were just talking about this. And, some yoga, things like that, you pay for the membership because, you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I feel, like I said, yoga is something you can do, anybody can do anywhere, anytime. So choosing to pay, to have an instructor is a privilege that we have, like in this country where we live and in the area that we live. Being able to join a nice studio with like well-educated instructors is a privilege. But when we look at everything else that we're spending our money on, right? Like whatever we're choosing, phones, clothes, cars, like coffee,
Starbucks.
Yes, like all the things that, we choose to indulge in. Yoga is so cheap compared to what you get out of it, which is peace of mind and like transformative effects. Like it's completely worth it to have that well-educated, instructor, guide to be a constant in your daily life.
Yeah. And that there is community meetings, and I know at Revive in Nashua they have, yoga teachers and certain yoga meetings that they do, and a lot of yoga studios and yogis like do have like monthly community meetings that offer like sliding scales, or I know that you have a sliding scale fee at your studio if people contact you and say they're in some sort of hardship and working.
Yeah.
So,
and you will have that at your studio.
I will have
too.
that at my studio. I'm actually building an actual 12-step that you can like bring your chip in and get like free yoga meetings. I'm actually coming up with that program, what that's going to look like for people in recovery. And that's all avenues of recovery. Like I feel like, we're all just so focused on addiction being drugs and alcohol, but food is an addiction, and food kills people, and heart attacks and overeating and all of these things. And it's not just, there's shopping addictions. There's all kinds of addictions and bad behaviors. And, just some of them are so much more socially acceptable than others. Yeah. But the pain inside of that, what you're trying to fill that void or fix that feeling inside of you, is never going to work from an outside thing. Yeah. Ever.
And that's, why the point of the nonprofit to Embodied, we bring yoga to young people, and those services are all free. And I know that there's other nonprofits, out there that are doing similar things and bringing free or reduced rate yoga and meditation services to younger people. And like you said, trying to address the core values, the core issues, like either before they manifest into addictive behaviors or just hoping to intervene at the right time. And I think it's about looking around, but these services are available in lots of communities and wanting to help people.
Yeah, Massachusetts has one, a nonprofit that's designed exactly, it's called Namaste Sober. Yeah. And it's all about yoga scholarships, and if people like write in and they do free community work and things like that. So, and like I said, at Revive, there's Y12SR meetings, and, I don't know about the other recovery communities, but I know that there's some out there. But, like Sammy said, to answer the question, some studios, yes, but it's because it's just like going to having an instructor for anything. When you go to the gym and you have a personal trainer, that those things cost money because they're educated to guide you through, the actual like movements to make sure you're not harming yourself and those kinds of things. Yeah. So we are almost done, and usually we close off with just a final statement from our guest saying something to the audience about, hope, or if there's somebody that's watching that's struggling with an eating disorder, something that you want to say to them to give them a little bit of hope.
Oh my gosh. So much. No, just that the same as drug and alcohol recovery, for eating disorder recovery, there is so much hope. Like I said earlier, used to not be able to envision a day where I would live without my eating disorder, and I've lived without it for 6 years now, and I don't ever, I never have to be uncomfortable in my body as long as I keep up my practice, and that is just like a magical thing. So, this practice of yoga and the communities that will support healthy body image and healthy relationship to yourself are out there, and just to not be afraid to reach out and to know that you're no different than anybody else who's getting help. Nobody is like unhelpable, right?
Yes.
It's just about taking that first step. So
Yes.
Yeah.
So good. And that's it. And that's like, you said it, like with community, like you build like a community in yoga, and like we build a community in 12 steps. And, the opposite of addiction is connection. And that is so important. And when we don't feel alone and we have people to support us and help us and realize that we're not the only ones going through that, and there's people that have like been here and walked the path, and we're here to help you and to guide you and hold your hand through that whole process, is, what actually really works. We can't do this alone.
Yeah. And I think that when we're in it, we can really feel like there's nobody that could understand. And the truth is, once you start speaking about your experience, you realize there's lots of people around you that do understand. And there's so much power in that, being able to be honest and lean on each other. And that just takes a little bit of bravery, to be able to be honest about where you're at. And I think that we think we'll be judged, or that that we will be different than everyone. And the truth is, it gets us where we want to go.
Yes. To being recovered.
To being recovered.
And Sammy has an amazing studio in Salisbury. It's one of my favorites. I go all the time. It's called The Cure.
Thank you.
And she just is now opening up a new one in Portland. And I'm also opening up a yoga studio in Manchester called Sacred Moon Healing Centers. We will be a little bit more than yoga. We'll have float pods and massage and Reiki, really just all the, just that thinking outside of the box ways to heal. So you can catch us there if you have any questions, our information or email. And, Sammy's the same. We'll just help in any way that we can. And we'll end it with just knowing that there's help and there's hope, and you don't have to do it alone. Thank you.
Thank you.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.